Welcome to the Commonwealth Policy Center's Legislative Forum. I'm Richard Nelson, Executive Director of CPC, and today we're going to talk about the Youth Health Protection Act. And with me to talk about this important bill in the state legislature is State House Member Savannah Maddox. Savannah, it's good to have you in the program.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it, Richard.
Yeah, so you introduced House Bill 336 earlier this session. Actually, you introduced it last year as well, a similar provision. And let me tee this up by just giving some context to this. We live in a time where many of our young people are told that they can determine their own gender. If they're feeling gender dysphoria, when they are not, their psychology is not compatible or not in sync with their biological gender, but their biological sex. It's okay to embrace what their psychology tells them, what their mind is telling them. And this is quite a new phenomenon. It's a new thing, but yet it's real. There are young people that are struggling with this, and I want to be sensitive at the outset and not dismiss some of the struggles that young people are facing, because this is a real issue, and I don't want to minimize that at all. But your bill, House Bill 336, addresses whether or not it's appropriate for caregivers of these children, of minor children, to make life-altering decisions. And according to the bill, it says that medical professionals will not be able to perform surgery or prescribe medication to facilitate the minor's desire to present or appear in a manner that is inconsistent with that minor's sex. What prompted you to introduce this bill last year and again this year?
Yes, absolutely, Richard. Essentially, what I have discovered over the course of the past 2 years is that not just in Kentucky, but across the nation, it is possible and is occurring that children under the age of 18 are receiving cross-sex hormones as well as puberty-blocking treatments to allow them to transition their gender from their natal sex into the opposite gender. And back in 2019, I recall hearing about a case in Texas with a 7-year-old child whose parents were engaged in a brutal custody war over the child, but one of the issues that had arisen was that the child was being transitioned. And at that moment in time, it was about, who has the authority to allow this child to transition, the mother or the father, because the father said, no, this is a young man. He's always been a young man. And the mother said that this young man was transitioning to a female and had experienced gender dysphoria. So the question in my mind that arose from that is, under what circumstances should parents of minor children ever be able to transition their child, or more importantly, to allow a physician to prescribe puberty blocking treatments or cross-sex hormones, because none of those treatments are FDA approved for children. And, again, like you said, it's very important to me to not dismiss the experiences of children who are confused, because there can be a whole host of reasons that children get these ideas or these feelings in their head. Some of them are born out of the media that they're watching, social media, peer groups, things of that nature, stuff they're seeing on TV. But then other things can pertain to trauma that they've experienced. But the bottom line is, these children, they need to receive counseling and professional help to deal with these issues. They do need to be reaffirmed in their worth, in their value, and in their merit, but also in their innate gender that is part of their biology, not to transition that away from them.
Yeah, so this is you're talking about somebody's feelings, and their psychological state, which changes. Our feelings change, our psychology changes, but gender, and gender and sex actually have two different meanings.
Yes.
But our biological sex is probably the better way to put it. Gender goes along with your biological sex. But here we're talking about a minor child that is not fully grown. Their mind is still developing, even in their mid-20s. And the question is, should a minor child be allowed to make that decision? And should the parents or caregivers of that child be allowed to make that decision? And this bill would say no, that they cannot do that, because they cannot truly consent and with the full knowledge of what they're doing.
And that's just the thing. No aspect of this bill is going to interfere with parents' rights in so much as they have the ability to raise their children how they see fit and to seek treatment, whether it's to affirm the gender dysphoria or to treat it or to do whatever they need to do to get their child on the right path. However, administering cross-sex hormones or puberty blocking treatments to children who are under age 18, knowing that in the vast majority of cases, when puberty is allowed to take place like normal, these children grow out of it and they do accept and embrace their biological gender, because we talk about gender being assigned at birth. No, it's in every one of our cells, even the cells in our brain. We either have chromosomes that are XX or XY. And so we need to get to a place where we are supporting these children who are experiencing these symptoms and also achieving a lifelong resolution, as opposed to just, in many instances rendering them sterile. That's when there's a huge human rights implication here for these children, because these decisions are being made sometimes as early as 9 and 11 years old when they first start receiving the puberty blocking treatments and then the hormonal transition therapy. You're taking away what could be the most important days of their life. I know for me as a mother, the 2 most important days of my whole life is when I brought my children into this world. And to think that based on a difficult time in a child's life, which is confusing for so many of us adolescents, that we're going to take away that moment from that potential mom or dad. It's wrong, and we need to pause, we need to be mindful, and we need to engage the medical community in ways that we can support these children without making life-altering decisions for them.
Yeah, that's a good point. There was a study done several years ago by a psychiatrist at Johns Hopkins, or at least that he referenced, and his name escapes me. But he indicated that upwards of 80% of gender dysphoric teenagers and young adults, by the time they reach their 30s, will embrace their biological sex.
Yes.
So they've gotten through that period of dysphoria, and their psychological state aligns with their biological reality. There are no other states that have enacted legislation like this. However, Alabama just recently, their state senate just recently voted 23-4 to approve a similar bill to what we're talking about here. Their state house approved something similar. It's in reconciliation now, so perhaps Alabama could be the first state. I think the South Carolina, one of their chambers, made a move forward on something like this as well. So what are the prospects of this actually happening in the future? We're out of time this session, and it's not going to happen this year. It wasn't even assigned to a committee. What's it going to take for the Kentucky legislature to move ahead on this?
I think that what I have sought to do over the past couple of years is to amplify the voices of people who have been harmed by this issue, of parents of children who have been faced with these decisions and have felt pressure on behalf of unproven science, because the science is not settled on this issue, on behalf of practitioners who have pushed them in a certain direction, to elevate their voices to the General Assembly, to make them understand that this is not a function of trying to engage in any type of discriminatory practice, rather to give Kentucky's children who are suffering from these issues the tools that they need to succeed. One of the things that is typically used as an argument in favor of gender transition is the increased suicidality among children who are experiencing this. But in reality, folks who undergo transition later on in life, they are 20 times more likely to end their lives. So this is not just a human rights issue, but this is something that we need to do to protect families here in Kentucky.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. We actually interviewed Dr. Julie Hamilton, who's a clinical psychologist, and she talked about that myth where there was a study that tried to purport that gender dysphoric youth are more suicidal, and they twisted it. They cherry-picked some of it. And actually, to your point, they're more likely to commit suicide if they go through with the gender transition, if I remember what she was saying correctly. So very different than what we're told. We're supposed to, and by the way, Savannah, I know that you care about Kentucky. You care about your constituency. I care about Kentucky, and I care about those who are struggling with this issue, gender dysphoria. And it's a question of which path forward. How do we help people who are struggling? What is good policy for our young people, minor children who really don't know any better? And I'd like to move to a case. We've got just a few minutes here, but I want to point out a case in Ohio where parents of a 17-year-old girl who wanted to transition, the parents said, no, we're not going to let you do this. She sued them in court, and a judge took that 17-year-old daughter out of their parents' home and gave her to their grandparents, to her grandparents. Made national news, but this is an issue. I'm wondering if this is something that's come into your view as far as, does this need to be addressed? I mean, parents losing their kids. This is a minor, 17-year-old is still a minor.
Absolutely. Whenever I first filed this piece of legislation last session, a friend of mine who has also worked on policy asked me to sit down and meet with the physician who leads a gender transition clinic right here in Kentucky. And in the context of those conversations, she openly revealed the fact that she wants it to where minor children, not only do they have the ability to receive these types of unproven, non-FDA approved treatments, she wants them to be able to do it without their parents' consent. And it was extremely troubling. So yes, we absolutely need to address that.
Are we aware of any cases where healthcare workers, pharmacists, doctors could be forced by parents or a guardian to dispense drugs or to do a transition surgery? Are we aware of, is this?
That's a situation that I've also sought to address legislatively, in so much as you do not want any type of reprisal to occur if a person in their sincerely held beliefs does not believe in providing those services for anyone, even folks over the age of 18, because we don't want to use the force of government to force people to engage in decision making or provide services that aren't in accordance with their beliefs. So I could see where that would happen, and it's something that we need to be looking at.
Yeah, yeah. Just a statement from Ryan Anderson. We hear, and we've got just a minute and a half, we hear a lot about science denier. So this is what Ryan Anderson, who's an authority on the transgender issue, he said, even if trans activists could answer these questions about feelings, that still wouldn't address the matter of reality. Why should feeling like a man, whatever that means, make someone a man? Why do our feelings determine reality on the question of sex, but on little else? Our feelings don't determine our age or our height. So somebody might feel very strongly about this, that I'm really a man trapped in a woman's body, or vice versa. How do we address overcoming somebody's feelings? We do live in a post-truth age, by the way.
And that's part of the issue. We do such a great disservice to lend credibility to ideas and beliefs that are harmful to people. And I think that what we can do as individuals is to speak the truth in love and to affirm a difficulty that someone's experiencing while not allowing them to cause harm to themselves in that belief. So I think that that's what we need to do, not just in the context of legislators, but every one of us.
Yeah, that's a good final word to close on. State Representative Savannah Maddox, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, Richard, thank you.
And thank you for tuning in to the Commonwealth Policy Center's Legislative Forum.